Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because we know people are joining us from different parts of the world. Very happy to be presenting the next edition of our B2B thematic webinar series. My name is Prateep Nayak. I'm at the University of Waterloo, and I'm also representing the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership for Building Strong Small-Scale Fisheries here. Uh, I would be the host today and the facilitator of this webinar. I will first introduce the webinar, the B2B Global Partnership, and our speaker today before we move on to listening to the talk, after which we will have time to ask questions. Please write your questions in the chat section of the YouTube so we can read it out to our speaker, and then our speaker would reply to your questions, and we'll have some discussions through that. So just as an introduction to the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership, which is a transdisciplinary research, knowledge, and action network with over 100 members from Asia, Africa, and internationally. The goal of this partnership is to support small-scale fisheries in their transition from vulnerability to viability. And the way we understand vulnerability and viability is not just in an economic or income sense, but also to include the political, the cultural, cultural and environmental and ecological aspects of small-scale fisheries people and society. We also understand that moving from vulnerability to viability is not just unidirectional. As societies and communities and households can move from vulnerability situations to viability, it is also possible for them to move from viability situations to being vulnerable again. So it is, in that sense, vulnerability and viability transitions are multidirectional and multidimensional. The focus of the B2B Global Partnership is fourfold at this time. The first is to co-create and co-produce the knowledge that is effective in supporting this transition. The second is to create a database or repository which will hold this knowledge in ways that can support the transition at the small-scale fisheries community level, but also the actions by all other stakeholders. The third element of our focus is developing the transdisciplinary capacity across all levels so that the transition from vulnerability to viability is possible. The fourth is to synthesize and integrate the knowledge that is generated, the knowledge that is co-produced in a way that it informs policy and governance mechanisms. The B2B Global Partnership aims to identify the diverse factors and conditions contributing to the vulnerability of small-scale fisheries and engage collaboratively with small-scale fisher communities and other key NGO, government, and university partners to enhance SSF viability. We are conducting transdisciplinary community-engaged research in 6 countries in Asia. That includes Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, and Thailand, and 6 countries in Africa. That includes Ghana, Malawi, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tanzania. In doing so, the B2B Global Partnership brings people and organizations together across physical, cultural, and disciplinary boundaries through a shared interest in addressing global change impacts on small-scale fisheries. The B2B thematic webinar series is an initiative of the B2B Global Partnership to facilitate and generate high-level discussions on vulnerability and viability themes and topics within the context of small-scale fisheries. The goal is to feature academics, representatives of governments, intergovernmental organizations, practitioners, graduate students and early career researchers, and members of the civil society who have made significant contributions to the theoretical, practical, and policy aspects of small-scale fisheries, both locally and globally. The B2B thematic webinar series for which we have gathered here today takes place on the last Friday of every month, and there are some uh, uh, differences in that time, as we are not having it on a last Friday this month, but it is typically on the last Friday of every month, and it will continue to be so during the year 2023. The series is available internationally through live streaming on YouTube. Details regarding the monthly webinars, including speakers, topics, and titles, and links to webinar platforms is available on our website, that is www.b2bglobalpartnership.org. Today's webinar is the 8th in the series of B2B thematic webinars planned for the year 2023, and the 32nd since January 2021, when it all started. And it is my privilege to introduce Ms. Navya Nair as our distinguished speaker today. Navya Nair is a PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo, Faculty of Environment, Canada. She is currently researching the connections between water quality and small-scale fisheries viability in coastal blue carbon social ecological systems. Her focus is on lagoon social ecological systems. Navya holds a master's degree in environmental studies in sustainability management from the University of Waterloo, Canada. She has also completed a Master of Technology in Environmental Engineering and a Bachelor of Technology in Civil Engineering from India. Navya Nair has a strong publication record, focusing on the topic of water quality and fisheries communities, especially exploring potentials for building strong and viable small-scale fisheries. Some of her most recent publications include Uncovering Water Quality and Evaluating Vulnerabilities of Small-Scale Fisheries in Chilika Lagoon, India. And the forthcoming publication is Exploring Water Quality as a Determinant of Small-Scale Fisheries Vulnerability. Navya has received numerous awards and recognitions for her leadership roles as Vice Chair Outreach External for the graduate section of the Waterloo Water Institute, Social Media Director, Waterloo Campus Compost, Social Event Host, Waterloo Graduate House, Green Residence Ambassador, Waterloo Sustainability, and many more. Navya is an active member, and I'm proud to announce this, and an early career researcher in the V2V Global Partnership, and passionately supports the work of the network on transitioning of small-scale fisheries from vulnerability to viability. It is my honor today to invite Navya Nair to deliver today's talk for the V2B thematic webinar series August 2023. And her talk is titled as Reimagining Sustainable Small-Scale Fisheries through the lens of water quality. Navya, thank you for making the time and agreeing to give this talk. The floor is yours now.
Thank you so much, Professor Prateep, for all the introduction, and hi and hello to all the participants who are joining from the whole world. I'll just start by sharing my screen. So let me know if you can see my screen.
We can see it. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to start this presentation by taking you to the imagination of beautiful days when you tasted your favorite seafoods. I know like some of you have already been with us in the V2V project meeting in Puri in India, and also like the field school that recently happened, and had a chance to like taste seafoods. But unfortunately, those days are numbered due to our actions in the oceans. So fishing communities are threatened. And even if you do not live anywhere near to the ocean, you're affected by it. So ocean gives us food, supports nutrition, provides pathways between continents, and it even offers fun and recreation. So my work has driven to fisheries for a change, and my research is related to like linking water quality and blue carbon ecosystem to small scale fisheries. And I would like to acknowledge like being a part of like B2B Global Partnership, and how we can contribute to the sustainable small-scale fisheries. So most of us have heard about small-scale fisheries and also worked on like small-scale fisheries, but hardly anyone knows about it. So I'll just start by introducing what are small-scale fisheries. Food and Agriculture Organization defines small-scale fisheries as a dynamic and evolving subsector of fisheries. employing labor-intensive harvesting, processing, and distribution technologies to exploit marine and inland water fishery resources. Typically, men are engaged in fishing and women in fish processing and marketing. Other ancillary activities related to small-scale fisheries are net making, boat building, engine repair and maintenance, and it can provide additional fishery-related employment and income opportunities in marine and inland fishing communities. So to put it more simply, they are not homogeneous within and across countries as well as regions. Small-scale fisheries play a crucial role in supplying fish and fishery products to local and domestic markets. They provide a source of fresh, affordable, and culturally significant food for communities around the world. But it doesn't stop there. We are all witnessing a shift towards export-oriented production and increased integration into global markets. So small-scale fisheries are now reaching consumers far beyond their local shores, contributing to the globalization of the industry. So from harvesting to processing and distribution, small-scale fisheries provide employment opportunities in often like remote and marginalized communities too. And these contributes to local economies and livelihoods. Women play a significant role in processing, marketing, and even as fishers themselves challenging traditional gender roles. So this sector's dynamism is demonstrated through its resilience and ability to adapt. Small-scale fisheries often face challenges like environmental changes, market fluctuations, and regulatory shifts. Yet they find ways to navigate these obstacles. Despite its importance, small-scale fisheries also face challenges such as overfishing, habitat degradation, and lack of access to resources and markets. So addressing these challenges is crucial for the long-term sustainability of the sector. So the study synthesized in 2015 by the Food and Agriculture Organization looked at livelihood and economic contributions of capture fisheries globally, and that is illustrated in this picture. So approximately 120 million workers are directly dependent on small-scale fisheries for their livelihood. And if you look at this figure, you can see that 97% of these people live in developing countries. Among them, more than 90% work in small-scale fisheries subsector. And what stands out is 47% of the total workforce is women. Another striking inference suggested by this data was that an estimated 5.8 million fishers in the world earn less than $1 per day. So small-scale fisheries provide directly or indirectly livelihoods to a large number of people. They sustain life, support jobs for millions of people worldwide, feed communities and countries, and are vital to addressing climate change. But these are troubled waters and troubled times. Chronic overfishing, intense recreational and commercial fishing leads to collapse of coastal fisheries, and then competition from other sectors, which are more powerful. And then there is an overall marginalization of small-scale fisheries, which threatens the economies and food security around the world. So the health of small-scale fisheries is closely tied to water quality. Pollution, overfishing, habitat degradation can all harm fish populations, making it harder for small-scale fishers to make a living. So it's time to recognize the importance of small-scale fisheries and prioritize efforts to protect and support them, both for the sake of the people who depend on them and also for the health of our ocean and planet. So water is a physical environment where fish develop, grow, and reproduce. So poor water quality affect fish and shellfish health through impairment of development and growth, which declines as fish catch. So low fish stocks lead to less income and poverty in small-scale fishing communities. And water quality refers to overall health and condition of water based on its physical, chemical, and biological characteristics. And it's essentially a measure of how suitable water is for various uses, like including supporting aquatic life, human consumption, and other activities. Now, why does water quality matter so much in the realm of fisheries? Well, the health of aquatic ecosystems and the success of fish stocks are intricately linked to the quality of water they inhabit. So if the water is compromised, it can lead to a cascade of negative effects that impact not only the fish, but also the people who depend on them. So water quality is like a delicate balance. Each parameter plays a role in shaping the overall health and sustainability of aquatic ecosystems, which directly affect the success of fisheries. So as we explore the theme of reimagining sustainable small-scale fisheries, we cannot ignore the pivotal role that water quality plays. A sustainable fishery is not just about the number of fish caught. It's about maintaining the harmony of the entire ecosystem. So by safeguarding water quality, we are ensuring the long-term viability of fisheries and the well-being of both aquatic life and the communities that depend on them. So water quality is influenced by a complex interplay of numerous factors. So let's break down some of these key parameters that determine the quality of water in our aquatic environments. So water depth, turbidity, transparency. The depth of water bodies affect the amount of sunlight that penetrates. This in turn influences the distribution of aquatic plants and organisms. So turbidity refers to the cloudiness or haziness of a fluid caused by a large number of individual particles. So it can impact the light penetration and affect aquatic life. Transparency, or how clear the water is, indicates the amount of light that can reach submerged plants and photosynthetic organisms. pH and alkalinity. So pH measures the acidity or alkalinity of water. It varies in different environments such as freshwater, brackish water, and saltwater habitats. So aquatic organisms have adapted to specific salinity ranges, and the sudden changes can stress or harm them. Another factor is like water temperature, so which influences the metabolic rates, reproduction, and overall activity of aquatic organisms. It also affects the solubility of gases like oxygen, which is very crucial for aquatic life. Oxygen content itself. Oxygen is essential for survival of aquatic organisms. It's dissolved in the water and supports respiration, growth, and other physiological processes. And factors like temperature, turbulence, and photosynthesis influence these oxygen levels. Another factor is nutrients and trace elements. Nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus are essential for plant and algal growth. However, excessive nutrient levels can lead to harmful algal blooms and ecosystem imbalances. So trace elements like iron, zinc also play vital roles in the biological process, but must be present in appropriate concentrations. Photosynthesis. Photosynthetic organisms like algae and aquatic plants produce oxygen, and they remove carbon dioxide from the water through photosynthesis. So this process helps maintaining the oxygen levels and also influence nutrient cycling. So thus water quality is like a multifaceted aspect of aquatic ecosystems that profoundly impacts the organisms within them. So it's like a delicate balance influenced by multitude of factors working together. And as we continue to study or monitor water quality, we gain different insights into the health of aquatic environment and our own well-being too. So this is basically made a portion of my master's research as well, which I did to examine the vulnerability in coastal fishing communities of Chilika Lagoon in India due to the water quality degradation, and also to assess how to achieve like an adaptation strategy to make communities less vulnerable and more viable. So I had specifically weighted 3 objectives that guided my research at that time. It was understanding the process of water quality variation in Chilika Lagoon, and then examining vulnerability issues faced by the coastal communities due to changes in water quality. And then third, analyzing various coping and adaptive responses of the fisher communities and their potential for creating a viable small-scale fisheries. And then so having discussed about small-scale fisheries, water quality, and the research that I did, I would like to change the direction and talk a little bit about like my study location, which is Chilika, which is some of them already has visited Chilika, so apologies for repeating the same information again. So Chilika is Asia's biggest brackish water lagoon situated on the east coast of India. And Chilika was traditionally recognized for its abundant fishery resources and productive ecological systems with a combination of estuarine, marine, and freshwater ecosystems. So Chilika is one of the world's most important wetland habitats, designated as a Ramsar site of international importance, which is home to numerous unique species of flora and fauna. And it is most important wintering site for migrating birds, as well as home to the world's largest Irrawaddy dolphin population. And about 800,000 people live adjacent to or in and around the lagoon. And the lagoon consists of around 225 different species of fish, as well as like diverse area of aquatic vegetation, such as seagrass and salt marshes. Also, several hydrological effects of the lagoon, such as runoff from unregulated depleted catchment and silt-borne freshwater discharges and lagoon water exchange, have dramatic and unprecedented consequences. And these social ecological changes in the lagoon ecosystem have turned out to be a cause of concern for local and the national government to dredge like a new seamouth in around 2001. And along with this, rising market for shrimp aquaculture have served as like a driver of rapid social ecological changes. So the main key literature base that provides like a strong conceptual and empirical foundation to address this research was understanding hydrological and water quality variations, and understanding vulnerability and viability of small-scale fisheries, and also in terms of coping and adaptation strategies. So water quality parameters play critical roles in a region's appropriateness that shapes sustainable livelihood of small-scale fishing communities. And the synergistic impacts of various human activities have hastened social ecological degradation. So in 1957, there was a construction of Hirakud Dam on the Mahanadi River and had a significant impact on Chilika Lagoon. So the dam altered the natural flow of fresh water into the lagoon, leading to changes in salinity level and water quality. So this change in water flow had implications for the lagoon's ecosystem, affecting the distribution of species and nutrient levels. And by 1980s, so shrimp aquaculture became a major economic activity around Chilika. While it contributed to local livelihood, improper management practices led to like issues related to water quality, and also like involvement of more non-fishers caused like access to resources, and then like resource allocation was put into a bit more stress. Then overuse of like antibiotics or like the discharge of effluents and alteration of natural habitat also resulted in water pollution, ecosystem degradation. And the super cyclone of 1999 was a devastating event that caused widespread destruction in the region, including Chilika Lagoon. So the intense storm surge and the flooding had immediate consequences on water quality as pollutants from the surrounding areas were carried out to the lagoon and impacting both aquatic life and even the overall health of the ecosystem. In 2001, efforts were made to artificially open the lagoon seamouth to improve water circulation and quality, especially the salinity content. So this intervention aimed to flush out stagnant water and improve the oxygen levels and salinity variations, which are critical for the survival of aquatic organisms. The management of the seamouth has been an ongoing challenge impacting water quality management. And in the years of 2013, witnessed the impacts of Cyclone Hudhud and Cyclone Phylin on Chilika Lagoon. So these cyclones brought heavy rainfall and flooding, leading to sedimentation, contamination, and changes in salinity. So the abrupt changes in water quality had like cascading effects on the lagoon's ecosystem and communities dependent on it. And Cyclone Fani in 2019 left its mark on Chilika Lagoon as well. The storm surge and the flooding once again affected water quality, exacerbating the issues related to sedimentation, nutrient runoff, and habitat disturbance. So the cyclic nature of these events highlights the ongoing challenges in maintaining a stable water quality. And the more recent COVID-19 pandemic has created unexpected and new challenges for fisheries' social ecological system. Other than health-related vulnerabilities, COVID-19 also has brought in like issues such as fishing bans, access to market, loss of fishing income, inability to migrate, inability to engage in alternate non-fishing occupations such as wage jobs, absence of long-term government welfare support, and similar other issues. So the case of Chilika Lagoon serves as a powerful reminder of how various natural or like human-induced events can shape water quality over time. So these events underscore the intricate relationship between water quality, ecosystem health, and human well-being. So by understanding these dynamics, we can better appreciate the importance of sustainable management practices to ensure the longevity of our aquatic ecosystem. The overall salinity of Chilika Lagoon waters raised due to the free entrance of seawater associated with the creation of artificial seamouth in 2001. And the hydrological state of lagoon water was influenced by aquaculture practices. Further, the growth of aquaculture, land reclamation, tourism, industrial and agricultural advancements, all functions as drivers of rapid changes in social ecological system of the lagoon. The consequences resulted in difference in water inflow, outflow rates, pollution, salinity variation, disrupted saltwater freshwater balance. So these factors such as dam construction or natural disasters like cyclone led to these kind of changes. And this included water spread reduction and siltation, reduced salinity, disease outbreaks, and even reduction in fish production and income for fisheries, and then a persistence of their livelihood, job displacement, out migration to cities. And looking at the aspect of vulnerability and viability, vulnerability is a state of susceptibility to harm from exposure to stresses associated with environmental and social changes, and from the absence of capacity to adapt. And various natural and human-induced activities created an imbalance in the social ecological system of Chilika Lagoon, affecting the livelihoods of fishing communities. So the lagoon water quality is one of the critical factors affecting that vulnerability of fishing-dependent communities, with the potential shape patterns to have access to the shoreline and out-migration. And the current changes like environmental, social, market, institutional put small-scale fishing communities at risk of vulnerability unless their capital, social networks, and cultural identity are protected. So for small-scale fisheries, complex, dynamic, and multidimensional vulnerabilities resulted in the absence of well-being from lack of access to capital and the loss of resilience. And building resilience into the human environmental process is a way to tackle uncertainty associated with vulnerabilities, such as the change specified by the unforeseen threats. And resilience is tied to well-being, capital, and ultimately viability too. So enhancing well-being, improving access to capital assets, and increasing resilience will typically foster viability for small-scale fishing communities. So coping and adaptation was another literature base to which we referred. So coping reflects like temporary responses to stressful situations, which is frequently manifested during the periods of crisis, such as time of flood or cyclone. And adaptation refers to changes in ecological, social, or economic systems as a result of existing or anticipated stresses, such as climate change or natural disaster, as well as their consequences. So viable adjustments are needed that help small-scale fisheries in providing good nutrition from fish, despite fast rise in the human population. So high pressure on fishing or water pollution or like the ocean pollution, and then like lagoon developments. And especially for our research, we did like a mixed approach with like more document analysis, secondary data resources, and case studies from the past reports. And it involved like more of a descriptive, interpretive, qualitative research approach used to assess the historical context of the study area, and then do a like comparative analysis was applied in evaluating the secondary quantitative data associated with the water quality in Chilika Lagoon. And then some of the results that we found in analyzing the water quality over the years, like, so water quality is a foundation for all the marine flora and fauna, as well as that affects the health of the ecosystem. So an assessment of various water quality parameters like water depth, turbidity, salinity variation, biological oxygen demand, nutrient disparity, and trace elements, and chlorophyll were conducted from the past data recorded. And this graph illustrates the variations of water quality parameters in Chilika from 1950 to like 2015. So the x-axis represents the time and the y-axis represents the different values of different parameters of water quality indicated by in various colors. So most of the lines, as you see, vary dramatically after 1990, which indicates the diverse human-induced and the natural phenomena causing water quality changes, leading to ecosystem variations and adverse impact on fisher communities. And it's very important to note that the hydrological parameters demonstrated in Chilika had observable changes in both seasonal and spatial scales. So thus we can infer from this given data that Chilika Lagoon was severely hit by various social ecological drivers from 1990 in terms of pollution, biodiversity loss, job security, and income. And the impaired drainage of lagoon, along with the impacts from siltation, salinity variation, eutrophication, then macrophyte infestation, and biodiversity loss exacerbate the factors for environmental degradation, as well as make them susceptible to anthropogenic pollution. So these pollutants trigger eutrophication and subsequent toxic algal growth, which in turn impact the survival of the living entities. So in summary, the assessment of water quality parameters in Chilika Lagoon over the time provides a window into the complex interactions between human activities and the natural processes. And the data underscores the need for a holistic management strategies that address both environmental, social, economic factors to ensure the resilience of the ecosystem and the well-being of the local communities. So the combined effects of temperature, tidal action, water dynamics resulted in seasonal water quality variations in Chilika. Siltation, industrial pollution, weed proliferation, bioresource depletion, and salinity changes pose threats to the lagoon's ecosystem. So as I mentioned, turbidity induced by these particles will restrict the passage of light and then reduce photosynthesis, even impact fish production, and kill the protective colonies of microorganisms and other species. Even pH and salinity fluctuations, it alters the fish behavior in a variety of ways, impact on the intertidal biodiversity. Rise in temperature proliferates the growth of invasive species that can make the wild aquatic species vulnerable, and warmer temperatures often cause decline of seagrass too. And eutrophication was an excessive buildup of nutrient salts in water, followed by excessive algal growth, which caused serious or dangerous ozone depletion and threatens the aquatic ecosystem and the decline of natural resources. Even introduction of nitrogen and phosphorus from the agriculture runoff contaminated the fertilizers and pesticides containing ammonia and urea, intrusion of sewage, waste dumped from industrial and domestic sector to the lagoon waters interfere with the ecosystem. So overall, the results of the study indicated that the water quality changes results in social ecological changes, which ultimately affects the livelihood of communities dependent on these resources. So the fishing sectors was affected by the biodiversity loss, water pollution, food insecurity due to low light penetration, and then hindrances on photosynthesis and heavy sedimentation, along with less oxygen levels causing hypoxia, eutrophication, and algal bloom. So all the mentioned natural and human-induced pressures in Chilika affect the quantity and the consistency of the lagoon waters, which significantly modified the biodiversity and biotic population of the ecosystem. So fishing communities, especially women and children, were exposed to the vulnerability associated with a lack of public health and high exposure to waterborne diseases. And then analyzing the very specific water quality parameters, as I mentioned before, water depth, turbidity, and transparency are all interconnected factors that influence light penetration into the water. So the increased turbidity resulting from dam construction and even like seamouth creation in Chilika Lagoon cause sedimentations and pollution, which reduce the transparency, obstructing the sunlight from reaching these aquatic plants and affecting the photosynthesis, which led to reduction of growth of vital underwater vegetation, impacting the entire ecosystem health. And pH and alkalinity, which was an indicator of water's acidicity or basicity. Extreme fluctuations in pH levels happen with the sudden abrupt changes, which disrupted the balance of aquatic life, affecting the reproduction behavior and physiology of various species. And high alkalinity also indicated excess nutrients, leading to eutrophication and then harmful algal bloom. Salinity or the saltiness of the water plays like a crucial role in shaping the aquatic habitat. So the drastic salinity variations was harmful as many aquatic organisms are adapted to specific salinity ranges, and the rapid changes in salinity already stressed or kill sensitive species and disrupt the balance of the ecosystem. And even water temperature affect the metabolism and behavior of aquatic organisms. And extreme temperature leads to stress and disease outbreaks and even shifts in species composition. So warmer weather can also lower the dissolved oxygen levels, which is detrimental to fish and other aquatic life. Even dissolved oxygen, so low oxygen levels led to hypoxia, a condition in which oxygen is insufficient to support life. So hypoxic zones leads to like the fish kills and negatively impact the biodiversity. Even nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, which are essential for this aquatic life. However, this excessive nutrient runoff from agriculture or the urban areas nearby or untreated sewage into the waters of Chilika led to eutrophication, triggering algal blooms that consume oxygen and then produce toxins which are harmful for the aquatic life. Then chlorophyll is a pigment that's found in plants that's very crucial for the photosynthesis. So even high levels of chlorophyll, often caused by the nutrient pollution, leads to low light penetration and affecting the productivity of submerged plants and creating imbalance of the ecosystem. So sedimentation smothered the aquatic habitats and blocked sunlight, impacting photosynthesis. Additionally, excessive carbon dioxide buildup can also lead to like acidification, harming marine life, even including the shellfish life. So the negative water quality variations can lead to a decline in biodiversity. A certain species are more tolerant of degraded conditions, and additionally, macrophyte infestations or invasions can also disrupt the native ecosystem, leading to shifts in species composition and then reduce the habitat quality as well. So in terms of pollution, like whether from industrial discharge or runoff, it introduced harmful substances into this water body, and this pollution can exacerbate the eutrophication and algal blooms, further degrading the water quality and posing risks to human health. So the various key water quality parameters that we discuss right now have interconnected impacts on the coastal ecosystem. Their negative variations can disrupt the delicate balance of marine life, hinder the essential process like photosynthesis, and then lead to like a detrimental effects such as an ozone depletion or biodiversity loss, even hypoxia. So it is imperative that we understand these interactions to mitigate and address the challenges facing our coastal environments. So small-scale fisheries as an important source of food, income, and livelihood. But however, they are also vulnerable to a range of challenges that can threaten their sustainability and resilience. So one of the other objectives that centered around our study was like to make a few observations about different domains of vulnerability in Chilica. And we classified it into like 5 categories, like ecological, social, economic, institutional, and technological. I would like to focus our attention on the significance of this figure here, which elaborates various impacts associated with each vulnerability. So first, let's look into ecological vulnerability, which pertains to natural resources such as water quality, and then the status of biodiversity, natural drivers, and various climate change factors. And second, we move on to like social domain within the fishing community that includes risk associated with livelihoods in communities involving unemployment rate, poverty, job opportunities of women, food and nutritional security, disease outbreaks, and political marginalization as well. Third is economic vulnerability to source savings, income, credits, loans are all part of the economic domain. Natural disasters and anthropogenic activities have caused a significant increase in the amount of damage to small-scale fishing communities, leading to restricted access to the market and facilities, which results in low income and poor education. And fourth is institutional domain of vulnerability that refers to the role of community-based laws and government regulations in influencing access to natural and financial resources. So it deals with major changes in the status of Chilica lagoon resources and their customary rights, resulting in livelihood loss and a rising sense of detachment from the lagoon by most of the fishes. Finally, technological domain of vulnerability that refers to major assets required to expand fishing activities such as boats, gears, infrastructure. So lack of sophisticated equipment for protecting the fishers from the invasion of barnacles or outdated technologies are a major risk faced by people in Chilica. They also face threat from tourism operations, posing danger to dolphins or as well as the ecological disturbance and mortality. And this brings me to establish the connections of water quality as a major driver that impacts social ecological systems of Chilica Lagoon and resulting in the vulnerability of small-scale fishing communities. So the changes in water quality and climatic variations in combination with resource conflicts created a situation where fishermen had to give up their livelihood activities for weeks at a time. The exposure and sensitivity of the hydrological intervention as a key driver highly impacted water quality. Polluted water puts the life of communities in Chilica at risk, and in the aspects of cleanliness too, as communities are forced to have like a low quality lifestyle and food due to their reduced earnings. So if you look at the figure more closely, you will notice there are several surprising connections between drivers of water quality and vulnerability of social ecological systems in small scale fisheries, which are complex and interconnected and transdisciplinary in nature. And thus I would like to point out that water quality plays a critical role in the maintenance of sustainable livelihood of fishing communities in Chilica Lagoon and many other coastal contexts. So the so far discussed observations also lead directly to the next point on coping and adaptation strategies that can assess the viability of small-scale fisheries. So specific outcomes of the impacts of water quality changes as a driving force are loss of income and livelihood, food insecurity, lack of access rights, intense fishing, and increased indebtedness, which lead to displacement and adverse mental health conditions. So coping and adaptation methods are needed in minimizing the impacts of environmental change on fish stocks and biodiversity, utilizing a structure that tends to address both short-term and long-term effects. Coping mechanisms are usually associated with smaller changes to improve like viability, such as reductions in the abundant species or occurrence of a new species in case of change in stocks. So some of the coping mechanisms involved is like raising awareness about social and ecological balances and healthy waters, identifying the vulnerable species and habitats, and then having lagoon cleanups and wastewater treatment plants or watershed management practices. And it also may involve intensification, like changing in gear selection without restrictions on species to catch, and even extensification process, like traveling long distance for fishing, which some of the fishermen in Chilika have done, and then catching all the available species that's available to them. So some of the coping mechanisms endorsed by fishing communities in Chilika Lagoon are increased dependence on credits, debits, and taking loans, utilization of money from financial sectors, non-financial institutions, and from multiple sources like incentives. Then trading household properties and land, mortgages, and then sale of fishing equipment are also practiced in Chilika as part of the coping measures. And additional strategies include teaching other skills to fishing communities, like training programs and skill development activities that can support the communities by earning money from sources other than fishing. So some families shift to agriculture, animal husbandry, seasonal cropping, and livestock rearing, as it provided more wide opportunities for employment. So this plays important roles in supplementing the family income and generating productive jobs in fishing sector, as it supports food and nutrition. But adaptation is more of a planned or autonomous for the potential survival of fisheries that can address like short-term or long-term impacts of the social ecological changes. And few of them involve maybe having like a water quality testing, which can have like a key measure to eliminate activities that results in water pollution and destructive fishing activities. Then outbitation had become the only livelihood option for fishers in Chilika by relocating to cities to avail employment opportunities. Then seagrass and the sandy beaches adds to the complex ecosystem of Chilika Lagoon, provide fishing communities and marine life with invaluable benefits. So projects may be dealing with engineering and building solutions that can restore this natural hydrological function, and water quality would be like really essential as an adaptation technique. And then development of technologies like the global positioning system, GPS, can employ in the fishing sector to track these fish populations, or like disaster risk management plan with early warning system or proper weather forecasting facility also can reduce the process of catching in unsustainable ways. And flexible policies involving local and traditional knowledge at the forefront to mitigate the socio-economic impacts of declining fisheries. So when all economic, social, ecological, institutional, and technological restrictions are met, the viability of small-scale fisheries are achieved. And furthermore, there are other industry and global approaches which we should take a look at that are initiated in Chilika for improving the monitoring of sustainability of this ecosystem. So the water environment at Chilika Lagoon reflects a complex assemblage of coastal, brackish, and freshwater habitats with estuarine characteristics. And these very valuable features granted Chilika Lagoon to be classified as Ramsar Convention as a wetland of international significance. So the framework of the management plan outlines policies and actions needed to achieve the wise use of these resources in Chilika and to advance the protection of its rich biodiversity, the components and the processes of the ecosystem, and the livelihood of dependent fishing communities. Then integrated water resource management. So an ecosystem approach was followed in wetland conservation, aimed in sustaining ecological aspects of the lagoon ecosystem. So the framework brings in stakeholders, institutions, and communities together at all levels to ensure that the wetland environment within the river basin is maintained. Another viability measure is using like the small-scale fishing fisheries guideline. They consist of principles discussing small-scale fisheries policies, strategies, and local mechanisms, but also other concerns affecting the livelihood of fishing-dependent communities. And the SSF guidelines are tools for millions of people employed in small-scale fisheries to meet the sustainable development goals as well. So I'd like to summarize what I have found like in that part of the research, which we recently published as paper too, is that the analysis revealed that water quality in Chilika Lagoon degraded between 1950 to 2015 due to the impacts from various natural and anthropogenic drivers. And the findings also highlighted existing flaws in the social ecological system, which created further exploitation of resources and communities. And as a result of shifting social ecological system, the system's capacity to provide advantages for small-scale fishing communities have severely decreased, which in turn led to vulnerability and marginalization. And finally, the research also explored a variety of short and long-term measures that reflected coping and adaptation strategies. So those served the basis for considering various responses and strategies for the viability of small-scale fishing communities in Chile. And that covers just about everything related to the connection between water quality and vulnerability of small-scale fisheries. And our recent publications highlight all this information in more detail. So the link to it will be posted in the chat box later. For anyone who is interested to know more. So overall, the research had the potential to contribute to viability of small scale fisheries or marine environment and fishing communities. And this benefits can extend beyond Chilica, and results can be replicated in the similar coastal context as well. So based on the research study I have done, I also I'm quite certain there are some more future area of research that can be very beneficial to explore more connections of social ecological system and small scale fishing community. And few of them were understanding the role of wetlands in small scale fishing, enhancements of well-being, and then insights on SDG 14 and 15, which is life below water and life on land in connection with the well-being of biodiversity and small scale fishing communities in Chilica, and also how application of small scale sustainable development goals and small scale fishing guidelines stresses of communities is in different countries for securing sustainable utilization, management, conservation of these fishing resources. And also investigating the different future uncertainties in Chilica Lagoon. It can be in terms of exogenous drivers like climate change, on water quality variations, or situations like COVID-19 that happened recently. So important, and also researches on importance of promoting and protecting traditional knowledge in small scale fisheries, or how to co-create the knowledge about even water quality changes or different other social ecological changes, and the past experience with viability, and also exploring opportunities to implement viable technologies at a community level. So currently in my PhD research, I'm building on one of these research recommendations, that is to investigate the linkages between the blue carbon ecosystem and water quality in coastal wetlands, with a specific focus on the small-scale fisheries context. So the study seeks to contribute to understanding of the ecological and the socio-economic interdependence in coastal wetlands, and provides insights for the development of targeted conservation and management strategies. So one of the main hypotheses in my research is few papers related to Chilica in certain BCs show that mangroves existed in Chilica, which is not currently a wetland in Chilica. Chilica has 20% of India's seagrasses. It just have planted mangroves right now, but two literature says that it had mangroves, which doesn't exist right now. So it might be something if in the research we are trying to find out what is the existing distribution of seagrass, or people are aware of it. If not, maybe in the next 10 years, seagrass might also have a fate similar to mangroves, which doesn't exist, and some other vegetation might show up, which might be impacting the fisheries. So understanding these connections will contribute to viability of small-scale fisheries by uncovering vulnerability issues, considering the health of wetlands and water quality in the coastal ecosystem. So a multi-sustainable development goal strategy can be used to build a holistic approach to bridge this gap, which will encompass livelihoods, biodiversity protection, strong institutions, and partnerships. And this aligns with the targets of SDG 6.6.1 to protect and restore changes in water-related ecosystems such as wetlands, and also SDG 14.B.1, which is on securing sustainable fisheries. So an overall contribution of the study would be the research provides a scholarly and practical contribution to the literature, and there was a predominant research gap in linking the water quality issues to vulnerability of small scale fisheries in Chilica. And the importance of the study lies in recognizing the key variables and drivers and consequences of water quality issues, and the influences in social ecological system in Chilica. And as such, this research will also provide new knowledge on water quality variation and its drivers in Chilica Lagoon. It's a first empirical contribution to this literature, existing literature. And overall, the research will potentially contribute to the viability of small-scale fishers, marine environment, fishing communities. So hopefully, I expect such advancements in research will limit the exploitation of coastal resources, and further work is always required to establish the viability of small-scale fisheries. Thus, I conclude my presentation, and I'd like to thank you everyone for your attention. Yeah, and I would be interested to hear your suggestions and thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Navya. That was excellent, outlining the significance of the connections between water quality, especially the many dimensions and many parameters of water quality, and the crucial linkages it has with social ecological sustainability within the context of small scale fisheries. It is really well done. And to my mind, listening to your talk, it almost suggests that this is such a novel area of research and constitutes cutting edge in many sense, because there is such limited resources on looking at these crucial connections. And congratulations on continuing to do work on that aspect of water quality connections with social ecological vulnerability. And hopefully there is something more concrete that would come out in terms of policy and governance suggestions. So now the forum is open, we are receiving questions. I don't see any questions on the chat, but they might start to flow. But in the meantime, if I may just take the opportunity to just ask you something with regard to water quality parameters. So in your description of water quality parameters, most of the water quality parameters are hydrologically defined. So these are hydrological parameters as far as water quality is concerned. But you do a nice job of linking them to the social impacts and the economic and ecological impacts of that. If I may just ask you what in the context of your research might constitute a social parameter of water quality, or a social ecological parameter of water quality. How do you explain that? What are some of the key insights that you may have drawn from your own research in explaining these parameters are more socially ecologically driven than just hydrologically driven?
Thank you, Dr. Prateep, for the great question. Yeah, like most of the explanations that I give on water quality parameters was more related to hydrological definitions. But in terms of like social ecological aspects, it connects more to the interconnected relations between to the water quality. So even when we say like words like turbidity or like the light penetration, which ultimately results in the extensive growth of algae, which is like visually, sometimes we go to Chilika Lagoon. For participants who have already been to the field school and project, they might have seen how water pollution has been visibly like seen, like maybe with thermocol dumping or the plastic pollution. So it's not aesthetically pleasing, first of all. And then second, you see changes in variations of species. And then also the changes in the vegetation too, like maybe as I mentioned before, like there were mangroves existing before, which doesn't have much literature on, but right now it's 20% of India's seagrass. But underlying factor might be the changes in hydrological parameters. So in terms of social ecological aspect, it might be shown mostly on the changes in vegetation or the fish pattern or reduction in the quantity of fish or like the amount of vegetation or like changes in the species in vegetations. And maybe related to social structure, it might be more on like terms of health of the ecosystem, even with the people or like the health of the fish, how healthy the fish is, like it changes. It might be due to the changes in water quality parameters. Even sometimes people doesn't recognize like the diseases that they get might be through water quality changes or the water that they interact with daily. So when we went to the community, there were a few people who said, in certain areas that once they go out in the waters of Chilika for fishing, when they come back, they get irritation on skin. They will feel bubbles around their skin, which was like a sudden experience that they felt, but it might be due to these water quality changes or like certain parameters in water quality that changed. These are like social indicators which is not like technically knowledgeable to them, and then they just literally go to hospital and get treated, but still the same issue happened because the water quality parameters has entirely changed due to certain reasons. If that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I mean, in an integrated social ecological system perspective, what might emerge as hydrological, parameters, once they start to interact with the social system, they become social ecological in many sense. So the same parameters that are hydrologically defined may become social ecological parameters as they start to interact with the society and the community. So there's a bit of thinking and research that could go into redefining those parameters, not just as ecological parameters or hydrological parameters, but as social ecological parameters. And your research is actually moving in that direction. Thank you. So we have a number of questions that are here. So if I may request that quick responses so that we can go through all the questions. So the first question I see on the screen here is from Ankur Sukla, who is asking, you spoke about factors influencing water quality in Chilika Lagoon and mentioned Cyclone Fani as one of the factors. Can you please elaborate what tool and findings made you come to that conclusion?
So this is mostly the observations from the past literature. So I haven't done like in-depth water analysis during 1990 to 2015. So there were all the articles from Chilika Development Authority, the Wetland Research Center, that was like published like every year. Unfortunately, there was no database like correlating everything together. And also the gap was there is like a lot of literature on water quality and also fisheries, but this like two different like separate sections. There was no much literature interconnecting both of them. So the water parameters that I analyzed is from the past research that was done by CDA or like the fisheries department. And then I correlated those information to see and plot in the graph to see like how the variation started happening in these years. As I showed in the graph, it's like most of them started fluctuating after like 1990, so like 2001. That's where the major two drivers in Chilika Lagoon has happened. And even the variations that's listed. So in the paper, if you Cyril might usually like post the link to the paper in the chat. So in that paper, we have listed like the different parameters, how different parameters of water quality has changed in different cyclones, even in Fani, and then also like the changes in seamouth has varied each parameters. Like I haven't put numbers in this presentation, but it's there in the papers. Or how each parameters has changed. So these are the studies from CDAs.
Yeah. And in other words, the link of water quality with cyclones and natural hazards come from a systematic literature review of existing published literature, and also the data that is available with CDA. So that gives a solid foundation to the results that you presented. Okay, so next one is from Faluke Ariola, and Faluke is asking, you spoke on biodiversity loss. Could you be specific in terms of fish species composition changes that are indicative of biodiversity loss?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ariola, for the question. So in terms of biodiversity loss, I can briefly explain. I haven't done in-depth analysis to it. So once the seamouth started like opening up and then shrimp aquaculture started, they started seeing there is like a change in salinity, like a difference, huge shift in the salinity variation, which started bringing in like more barnacles, jellyfishes, and then different other species, which was not there before in Chilika. And also this invasive species reduce like the population of the fish that they used to get. And like having introduction of the shrimp aquaculture, like raise the shrimps and the different, it just improve, like increase the salinity content and the different water parameters, which reduces the fish loss. And also the migratory pattern of like the birds started changing. So they started seeing less birds, which they often used to see. Unfortunately, I'm unaware to tell the specific names of the birds, but there are the literature says that there was less birds like started showing up due to the changes in water shifts or like the changes in the biodiversity of fish that showed up. And also like different vegetation patterns also cause these kind of changes. So when I referred to the biodiversity loss, I was referring to these. And also like the impacts on like tourism. So when they started introducing the motor-driven boats, it started disturbing even the fish populations and also like especially the Irrawaddy dolphins. So they started seeing shift, like these dolphins were started like showing up or like they were harmed during this process, which caused the biodiversity loss as well.
Yeah, and if I may just add, to that, given my own experience in Chilica and also being part of your research, Navya, is to Ariola's question about is there specific impact on the composition of fish species? I think we would say yes, because there was drastic change in the richness and the diversity of fish species in certain parts of Chilica Lagoon because of these water quality changes. Many species were recorded in earlier studies that went extirpated, rather than extinct. The fish catch basket of the fishers looked very different in certain periods of time, where the diversity of species that they used to catch and send to market reduced drastically. There is study also that have recorded change in fish habitat to crab habitat, and that is a direct impact from water quality changes, and the impact on habitat changes and all of those, in food web and food chain and all. So there is, cascading effects in terms of, the richness and diversity and composition of fish species. Natasha Sero, who is just finishing her data collection in Chilica, is researching the most significant and important species in Chilica, and she's finding really interesting aspects of this composition changes in fish species in Chilica as well. There is cascading effects in. Okay, so the next question is from Isa Decunel. And Isa is asking, in regions with limited resources, that cost-effective solutions, what cost-effective solutions have shown potential in managing and improving water quality for small-scale fisheries? Are there any specific case studies or success stories that you can share where a focus on water quality led to positive transformations in the livelihoods and sustainability of small-scale fisheries?
Okay, so just like to reiterate the question, is it like what are the existing like coping and adaptive measures?
Yeah, so the two parts of the question. One is, are there any successful case studies where water quality has been addressed to make sustainable small-scale fisheries? And then the first part of the question is, what are some of the solutions or ways to address the potential in managing and improving water quality for small-scale fisheries?
Yeah, in terms of the existing ones, like once it has been declared as like the Ramsar site, as I mentioned, they started like having an integrated water resource management, and also the once it's declared as a Ramsar site by the IUCN, they also had like protective measures and plans. But over the time, and also like considering the different hierarchy of this, like the processes, it's not maintained properly. So there is like flaws in the system. So they have potential measures to like measure different water quality parameters, to monitor them like frequently, and then understand these changes and then incorporate. So this is always like an iterative process. Like you have to monitor these water quality parameters and then do adaptive or coping strategies like continuously. But although it started at some point of time, it's not monitored or regulated on a regular basis, which is the flow in the system. And even like technological measures, as I mentioned, like they don't have like an early monitoring system on disaster management or like a risk. So these systems can help like the fishing community, like to maintain their like protective equipments to reduce the social vulnerability on those sites. that's the existing measures. And in terms of like these solutions, maybe having like a wastewater treatment plant to each processing facility, or like even Chilika has the history of like having untreated sewage that's dumped into the waters that ultimately flows into the lagoon. So maybe having those treatment plants, it's not just about having a solution at the place, it should also be monitored regularly. So even though like we have water treatment like equipments, it's not monitored regularly. So there should be a centralized process where in which you have the solution, but at the same time, it should be monitored regularly. And also all the review process has to be taken like periodically so that the waters are maintained well, which also ultimately affects the fisheries, the fish diversity, and also they can like do research based on that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Navya. And I think, one of the key, contributions your research is making is to identify the key drivers that are impacting the water quality, in an adverse way. One of the answers to the question by Isa could be that, if we can go back to the drivers, since they have been identified, and try to address those drivers, water quality would be addressed. The issue of water quality can be addressed. So in other words, so to address water quality issues in Chilika, one could go to the source of the problem, which are the identified drivers, and see how those drivers can be worked with, so that there's their negative impacts on the water quality in Chilika could be lessened. So that's one way to kind of do things. So I'll move on to the next question, which is by Meshuin. They're asking, what if the water has high acidity to fish cultivation, even we maintain the water? The case in my region, the water have a lot of mineral heavy metal, but the fish use for daily food for people. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of heavy metal, but it is probably still being used as food by people. How do you address the question of acidity? It's not a very clear question to me, but did you?
Okay, so if it's related to high acidity, it's like I think it's basically the ocean acidification, similar to ocean acidification. Maybe it's just like it's not an issue in Chilika Lagoon, but I can generally like address it based on the experience of mine related to water quality, like research projects. So it definitely causes disruption in the fish like physiology, and then it has like altered behaviors on like because it gives high stress to the fish habitats, and it can lead to like reduced feeding or like disrupted migration pattern, like overall the disruptive process. So to resolve high acidity issue, it's usually like reducing pollution. It's a very fancy term to say it's reducing pollution, but it takes like a lot of efforts, because in acidification there is like release of acidic compounds into the atmosphere from human activity. So it can be like anything related to agriculture, or like oil spills, even motorized boats. So all these like impact, and then reducing that pollution, and then maybe having like a cleaner renewable sources, which is like an ideal condition, or maybe like having a strict regulation on pollution can help mitigate these kind of acidification process. Usually in a smaller scale, the process is adding lime, which is calcium carbonate, so to bodies of water, can help neutralize this acidity, but it may not work in a lagoon, an extensive water body. So this is done in usually lakes or streams to raise the pH levels and then restore like a more balanced ecosystem. Some other process will be like a watershed management, like having proper management of watersheds. Like it's very effective in preventing excessive runoff of acidic compounds in water bodies. So also implementing practices like restoration, reforestation, and then erosion control, then responsible agriculture practices also reduce the like the input of pollutants to this water body. And also enforcing regulations to limit emissions of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen if it's like a more industrialized area. That can also relate it to acid rains. So maybe having international agreements or domestic policies will help in that. Like, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's to my mind, that's a great response, because you need a multi-scalar approach, right from the bottom to your reference to, international agreements and all, depending on the nature of the problem itself, and especially coastal lagoons, which really needs catchment management, and somewhere, in your research you mentioned also that there are 52 small and big rivers and rivulets, that fall into the lagoon, which suggests that unless you know what is happening in those 52 rivers and rivulets, it's very hard to manage the water quality unless you know what is happening in the Indian Ocean, which feeds salt water into the lagoon twice a day. It is very hard to talk about water quality. So that makes it a very complex and interconnected system. And really, the water quality that is in question in Chilika Lagoon or in any coastal lagoon really depends on a lot of factors that are external to the lagoon itself. So therefore you need an integrated and holistic management perspective, and therefore the governance that could bring in to manage the social ecological system. I know we have less than 5 minutes left. I have two great questions, so I would read both of them. If you could quickly respond, and then we'll bring it to an end. So the first question is from Maha Abdul Basit, and Maha is asking, with all the pressure put on fisheries communities to fish, with considerations to declining fish stock, if improving water quality influence fish stocks, would it consequently alleviate their pressure? So if you address water quality, can it take off the increasing pressure on small scale fisheries? The second question is by Inji Lee, and Inji is asking about the coping strategies. How many of them do you think can be undertaken as a community-based approach or bottom-up approach, not government-driven? So how many of the adaptive coping responses that you mentioned are exclusively or primarily community-led, not government-led?
Okay. Thanks for the great questions, Maha and Inji. So addressing the first question, if like improving water quality influence fish stock and would it consequently elevate this pressure, I feel it's a yes, because improving water quality can indeed have like a positive impact on fish stocks and subsequently elevate this pressure, because when we start exploring the different water quality, it can lead to healthier fish population and then reduce the pressure on fisheries, because improving water quality means like creating a healthier aquatic habitat. So clean and well oxygenated water supports the growth of aquatic plants or even algae, phytoplanktons, which are the vital food sources for many fish species. So even like having adequate dissolved oxygen levels are also crucial for the survival and the growth of these fish. So when habitat conditions are optimal, fish populations can thrive. So this ultimately leads to higher fish stocks. And also healthier water quality supports like successful reproduction of fish, having adequate oxygen level, balanced pH, absence of pollutants. So it's like better egg development and survival of their larvae. So more young fish are able to reach the maturity, increasing the overall population. So even right now with the pressure, sometimes people catch the juvenile fish, which like disrupts the entire functions of the fishery system. So clean water reduces these stresses, but polluted or contaminated water weaken the fish immune system and is more susceptible to diseases. So it even reduces the like it gives higher survival rates and healthier fish stocks, ultimately leading to biodiversity conservation too. So it's not only about contributing to ecosystem resilience, but also provide different prey options for predatory fish and helping or maintaining the boost in that populations. And also ultimately it results in sustainable fishing practices, and also economic and social benefits, like not really supporting local economies, but also like enhancing food security and well-being of communities, if that makes sense. And in terms of coping strategies, I might say like having a co-management or like a participatory governance, like communities can collaborate fishers or local stakeholders and researchers to develop like co-management plans, because many of the strategies that listed by me in adaptation and then coping strategies should go in hand together. sometimes one approach doesn't like makes a success. So these plans involve like a shared decision making, where local knowledge is combined with scientific insights to create like a sustainable fishing practices. So that addresses like more local needs and resource conservation, and even like having some organizing workshops or training sessions similar to how we did like in Puri, or like information sharing activities based on researches that being done in Chilika. So communities can promote those sustainable fishing practices, which include like more appropriate gear or adhering to catch limits, or like avoid using like destructive practices. So I feel like co-management and the participatory governance would be a better approach, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does make sense. Yes, yeah, that's a really good reference before we end. Because even if it starts with bottom up, it has to lead to more participatory, collaborative, and shared management, as you just mentioned, Navya. Otherwise, it's just going to be one way, and the other parties, especially the government, not recognizing the community actions. It has to meet at some point to make it a more collaborative, co-managed, and shared, management. Then only we can achieve the goals of viable and sustainable small scale fisheries. On that note, thank you very much, Navya. That was excellent. And thank you to all the participants and audience for the wonderful and very meaningful questions. And this has only enriched our discussions about small scale fisheries and our effort and other efforts around the world to create strong and viable small scale fisheries in many places in the world. And we'll continue this. So I invite you all to our next edition of the thematic webinar series, which will be on the last Friday, I think, which is 27th of October. We will be announcing the speaker and the topic very soon. Keep an eye on our website and on our Twitter, but we look forward to seeing you all and many more people at the next webinar next month. Once again, thank you very much to all participants, and special thanks to you, Navya, for bringing to our attention your excellent and very meaningful research. Please continue the good work, and we'll continue this discussion. Thank you very much. Bye-bye for now.